Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ruth McGowan, the Literary Assistant at the Abbey Theatre, and I'm very pleased to welcome you here today. This is the first of 3 panels on the topic of the theatre of conflict. On each of these panels, we have invited leading international theatre artists to enlighten us about their practice and share their experiences of making work in areas of conflict and post-conflict. It is my great pleasure to introduce this afternoon's panelists. Our first speaker is acclaimed theatre director Conall Morrison. We're standing here today on the set of Connell's production of She Stoops to Conquer. Based in Dublin and originally from County Armagh, Connell has worked extensively at the Abbey Theatre and at the Lyric Theatre Belfast, as well as making work for the RSC, the English National Opera, the National Theatre London, Storytellers Theatre Company, and Prime Cut. His 2012 production of Richard II in Arabic played in Jericho, Ramallah, Dubai, and at the Globe Theatre. This afternoon, Conall will reflect on the journey of his own adaptation of Sophocles' Antigone from Ramallah to Stormont, and discuss how classical drama can help us to understand and explore modern conflict. Our second panelist is director and producer Susanna Trisellian. Susanna's work focuses on the promotion of gender balance in international theatre. Based in London and originally from Wiltshire, Susanna is a frequent collaborator of the European Theatre Convention, the Nottingham Playhouse, and Contact Theatre. She's a freelance producer on BBC Radio 4's Woman's Hour and is currently producing a documentary for BBC Radio entitled Theatre of the Abused. This afternoon, Susanna will share her vision for the recently founded Project Ariadne. Together with filmmaker Georgie Whedon, Susanna has embarked on this global project that documents and spotlights the work of female artists in areas of conflict and post-conflict. Our final panelist is one of those artists, award-winning playwright and director Ruwanthie de Chickera. As artistic director of the critically acclaimed Stages Theatre Group, Ruwanthie is committed to creating socially conscious and original Sri Lankan theatre. Originally from Colombo, she's an Eisenhower Fellow, a current member of the Literature Panel of Sri Lanka, and a visiting lecturer at the National University for Performing and Visual Arts in Colombo. Her plays have been produced in Sri Lanka, the UK, Japan, India, Australia, and the Philippines. On today's panel, Ruwanthie will discuss the challenges and the triumphs of devising theatre in Sri Lanka post-Civil War. I'll now hand you over to our first panellist, Conall Morrison.
Thank you, Ruth. Good afternoon, everybody. I've got a horrible fear that my speech is a little longer than my allotted time, so I'm just going to speak at a bit of a clip, so please come with me. Antigone and Me, by me. Brian Friel has a line in his play Translations that has almost passed into the parlance. My friend, confusion is not an ignoble condition. It is, of course, a line spoken by a character, a drunken schoolmaster who knows that he and his community is facing ruin, but it has such elegant epigrammatic potency that it's a gift to those of us who are floundering about, left increasingly perplexed and maybe fearful by the world's conflicts. Je suis Charlie, I think people are saying je suis confused, je suis afraid, je suis please just stop this mad murderous shit and get out of our comfortable Western lives. The schoolmaster's line in the play ennobles the condition of confusion, separates you out from the shrill, adamant ideologue, and it accommodates what Nicky Green called the political ethics of doubt, as if to tick don't know is maybe to adopt the more scrupulous position. But I suppose we're all here to ask, can drama help with the search for clarity, for understanding? Can it help put shape on the confusions, condensing issues that are complex and painful into graspable narratives? And when it does so, what might be the cost to the ethics of complexity? In 2001, in June, 2 days before I was due to travel to a theatre conference in Tel Aviv, a 22-year-old Palestinian blew himself up outside the Dolphinarium disco on the Tel Aviv beachfront. He killed 21 others and injured over 120. He'd packed explosives and ball bearings inside a drum, which he banged as he walked up and down the queue, chanting in Hebrew, "Something's going to happen." The shockwaves went out around the world. Half the delegates to the conference took fright and cancelled. Suicide bombings were still relative rarities then, as opposed to today, when, for instance, in November alone last year, there were globally over 650 suicide bombings in 1 month. But as a good Northern Irish boy, this didn't really dismay me, and I'd long been fascinated by that part of the world, so off I went. And with standard ghoulishness, I went down to the bomb site. There was the instant shrine, candles, lots of teenagers crying and singing, dancing around in mournful trances, a lot of ritual. And of course, I found myself thinking about the dead, mostly teenagers, mostly young Russian immigrants, more dead Jews, and about the bomber who had engaged in his dark little ritual before detonation, before the massacre, and how his action was part of the Intifada, the uprising sparked off by Ariel Sharon going up to the sacred site of the Temple Mount, a deliberate, performative gesture of provocation, knowing it would create escalating violence. Sharon acting as he had done all his bloodied life, from the Sabra and Shatila massacre onwards. And there I was, standing amongst the candles, looking down at this latest link in the chain of blood. But it wasn't as if I hadn't thought about killing before, having known people who'd killed and people who'd been killed in the north. But this seemed different. What was the level of righteous, raging impotence that drove somebody to empower himself by the sacrifice of his own life? And just before, to go up in amongst the people that you were going to kill, up close, intimate with the humanness that you were going to obliterate. No smart bomb, this. And on the other side, what was the communal pathology that would drive the Israelis to keep such a dehumanizing chokehold on the Palestinians and to act so often with such crushing force? When the Intifada started, Jacques Chirac, when attempting to mediate, protested to the Israelis that with them firing live rounds from helicopters on Palestinians throwing stones, killing 47 people in 5 days, he couldn't convince anyone that the Palestinians were the aggressors. But the escalation occurred inevitably. The bricks, as they often do, turned into bombs. And from 5 suicide bombs in 2000, it jumped to 40 in 2001, the bombs on buses, in restaurants. And when I was out there, and this is my first trip, I remember my ability to think it through actually diminishing, because I felt that the place was so emotionally charged, and this clouded my response to it all. I couldn't keep a layered position properly in focus. Things seemed to reduce to binaries, but yet there was definitely nothing like a clear right or wrong to hold on to. In broadest terms, there seemed to be right versus right. The undeniable right of Jews to seek sanctuary and survival after the Holocaust versus the undeniable rights of the Palestinians to have their homeland acknowledged and their human rights respected. Elements in both parties seemed possessed of a ferocious, unbending absolutism. No mimsy ethics of doubt here, lads. Both parties were acting on behalf of numberless dead. Both parties were self-affirmed in their rightness by history. As somebody put it, the Nakba versus the Shoah. And of course, both parties with different divine ordinances, different gods on their side. I didn't actually get to talk to any Palestinians on that trip. And the Israelis were largely unwilling to talk about the situation, at least the ones we met were. The talk was of a depoliticized theatre of the imagination, of the spirit, of the poetic, a rather bland aesthetic universalism. Even though myself and some of the other delegates felt that surely there was no more pressing topic than the current situation, especially with 22 youngsters freshly dead. The German artist Joseph Beuys would often start his talks with, "Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I would like to start with the wound." The wound, of course, being the German wound of epic crime and epic guilt, or lack of it. And yet we couldn't really get the conversation going. We were theatre colleagues, yes, but ultimately we were tourists, just passing through. And yet, where the fuck did I get off, demanding that they engage with my moral seriousness and talk about these painful issues? As a northerner, you'd be well sick of people saying, "You see, the thing about the north is..." And I left the place, went home, heartsore and rather confused. As chance would have it, on my return home, I was offered a commission by Mary Elizabeth Burke Kennedy of the late lamented Storytellers Theatre Company, and we agreed that I would do my own translation of Antigone. In Sophocles' play, Two brothers, Eteocles and Polynices, the sons of Oedipus, kill each other in civil war. You know that when Oedipus is involved, there's a chance things mightn't end well. The new leader, Creon, decrees that one of the brothers, Polynices, is a traitor to the state and is not to be given burial rites, is to be left to rot where he fell, with death the penalty for anyone who flouts this edict. However, Antigone, Polynices' younger sister, defies the order and buries his remains, declaring she is acting in accordance with natural justice, that she is obeying eternal laws infinitely greater than Creon's man-made variety. Neither Antigone nor Creon will listen properly to each other's argument, or to pleas for moderation or compromise from others. She continues to defy Creon, he will not show mercy. Antigone is then tombed up to die, but she hangs herself. And then the dreadful consequences come crashing down. Her fiancé, who was Creon's son, kills himself, as does Creon's wife. Antigone's sister announces she too will die. The city-state of Thebes is convulsed with shock and mourning, and Creon himself is left a crazed and shattered man. And while our hearts may go to the young girl, compelled by her age, her beliefs, and her passion to sacrifice her life, Sophocles, the master dramatist, gives great arguments to Creon, depicting him as severe, yes, but incorruptible, and determined to take the tough decisions necessary for the greater good. Sophocles knows that in a good play, every character is right. Right against right is the best dramatic structure. You let the audience decide. And the more I studied it, the more I felt I was reading in archetypal form the play of the Middle East, of opposed moralities, of contradictory narratives, of violent intensities, of natural justice and the assertion of human rights in conflict with the codified law, the interests and identity of the state, of the desperate individual making a stand against the state using the only substantial weapon they have left, their own life, and the ruler, the powerful, saying, no, we've come through too much. We've come through the fucking flames. We don't care who we have to crush now to protect ourselves. And we will not get confused between compassion and weakness. I felt that the dark complexities of the Middle Eastern conflict would help me access the voltage of Sophocles' play. And I thought the play, in turn, might help me, and maybe an audience, contemplate those complexities, find a pattern in that Rubik's Cube of competing moralities. I wrote most of the translation in the Heinrich Ball cottage in Akel, a house bequeathed to Ireland by the German writer. I later discovered how fitting this was when I learned that he too had written an Antigone, inspired by the German state's delay in handing back to their families the bodies of Andreas Bader and Ulrike Meinhof, removing the brains before they finally did so. Which reminds one too of Seamus Heaney's Antigone, The Burial at Thebes, which was partly inspired by the British Army's obstruction of the funeral of hunger striker Francis Hughes. My translation was quite clean. It didn't refer explicitly to the Middle East. The setting was, let me see if I can work this machine. No, I don't think I can. I'm an artist, darling. Are we on? Are we good to go? Okay, let me see. Come on, baby, you can do it. Which button? Just give me your hand here, please. This doesn't count as part of my time, by the way, if anybody's got a stopwatch. Do you know what I mean? I'll keep chuntering on, actually. So the translation itself didn't actually refer to the Middle East. The setting was suggested by costumes and projected images. Although Sabine Dargent, the designer, actually got emails from the CIA, no less, half warning, half threatening her about some of the websites she was trying to access for the photographs. Now listen, I'm going to go with this. Are you ready? And rock and roll. Give it up, come on. That is, no, sorry, outrageous appeal for applause. That is the one-man chorus on his burnt-out car. Projected images, although, as I said, the CIA malarkey. Let me get back on my track here. These are wonderful photographs by Ross Kavanagh. The attempt was to evoke a world, but also to refer to how that world is mediated to us through images, is a skewed visual construction, built by choices and agendas of photo and newsroom editors. For instance, it was only really when I spent time in Ramallah that I realised that I actually could feel infinitely safer there than I often do at the Abbey Street Lewis stop. And that's not something you would have known from the news. A couple of shots. That's Antigone and her sister. That's Creon. That's Tiresias. There's the chorus again. And that's Antigone given out. But between the projections and the music and performance styles, I was also trying to build in various kind of fail-safes, trip switches, kind of neo-Brechtian devices saying that this is a theatre presentation. It's open-ended. It's more questions than answers. It's not trying to pretend it's docudrama. It's not trying to trade on the real pain of Palestine and Israel. But I do wonder, no matter how many self-aware devices I built in, was that really just disingenuousness? Was I still really on the sly, trading on that pain, secretly bankrolling my own stage production of Antigone with the real-life anguish of others? And though the show was well received and written about and discussed, I felt at the time intelligently, I wonder what did it really manage to achieve? And 12 or 13 years later, I'm still confused about the answer to that. A couple of years after the show, Mojisola Adobea, a friend and colleague, got in touch to say that she'd recommended the show and the script to Ashtar Theatre Company, a Ramallah-based company that she'd worked with. And we're very lucky to have one of the artistic directors with us for this conference, Iman Aoun. She'll be speaking, I think, on Saturday. So if anybody heckles this next bit, shouts up, "That's rubbish," you'll know it's her. You'll know it's her. I spent a wonderful week with Iman and the company at their theatre, reading and discussing the text, moving between English and Arabic. It was a profoundly engrossing experience to be there, to see Ramallah, to travel in the West Bank, to see the monstrous scale of the wall and the spreading blight of the settlements, a misnomer if ever was one, because these places are towns, substantial towns. But best of all was to work with the actors, who were welcoming, open and generous, opinionated and garrulous like actors everywhere, but incredibly politically astute and well-informed and committed to the work in hand. We finished the workshop at the end of the week with presentations of short scenes or distillations of scenes from Antigone, some of it in English, some of it in Arabic, some of it sung. But at the end of a fine week, Iman said, roughly, forgive me, Iman, if I have this at all wrong, "Thank you, but no, this isn't for us." Maybe size and scale, a couple of things like that. But mainly, she said, this isn't for us because it doesn't reflect our experience. In the play, the way my concept had it, Creon broadly represented the Israeli power. He has sustained dialogues with Antigone, effectively representing the Palestinian predicament. But, said Iman, we don't have dialogues with Israel. There is only a monologue of power, of them dictating to us what way it will be. The play, in this construction, in my construction, is a fantasy, and never more so than the idea that at the end, the Israeli Creon would suddenly come to consciousness, be crippled with guilt and remorse, and stagger about asking for forgiveness. No, nonsense, just not going to happen. So I half countered that the play functioned as metaphor, a clash of archetypes, and as for the ending, well, all empires based on force and subjugation will ultimately crumble. But no, it was a fair cop-gov. My little concept had been tried out fairly in the place it was inspired by, and the concept had been found wanting. It did not square with a lived reality. For me, it was an object lesson in the pitfalls of yoking things together, of identifying equivalences, of conceptual shotgun marriages. I'm not saying one shouldn't set up plays as echo chambers, and all good plays should indeed resonate beyond their literal confines. But yet, the lesson is well taken. Think long and hard again before you comment on, before you steal from another's problems, another's pain. Tread softly, for you tread on my realities. But we parted as friends. Iman said we'll do something together sometime, and she was as good as her word. In 2012, I was back out there, and as you heard from Ruth, was directing Richard II, in classical Arabic, no less. And it was one of the best directing experiences of my life. It's just a shot of us at the Globe there. Our discussions, though, about where to set it, about how did it relate or not to the so-called Arab Spring, what right did the company have to make some kind of pan-Arab statement? Well, that's actually another day's long lecture. However, in 2013, John Larkin, the Northern Irish Attorney General, got in touch with me, and thankfully it wasn't about the library fines. He's the first Attorney General Northern Ireland's ever had. Prior to this, the law was overseen as part of direct rule from London. A wonderful fella, perfectly content to intervene anywhere he thinks appropriate and challenge the powers that be. You may have heard of him recently recommending charges of criminal fraud be brought against the Bank of Scotland for their dealings with people in mortgage arrears. He had heard that I had done a version of Antigone and asked would I be willing to present it in workshop form to a mixed group of legal figures and arts workers in his conference room in Belfast. John's belief is, and like with him, and I hope I don't misremember and misrepresent here, that the law listens to exclusively to the law, that it would benefit lawyers and judges to think about problems using a wider set of diagnostic tools. He cited a law professor he once had who made his students read poetry, an invitation into alternative ways of thinking and analysing, maybe even of feeling. John also thought it might be fruitful for arts figures to learn more about the law, about the details of how their society was being run and ruled over. So he rounded up the lawyers, legal academics and judges, and I invited the figures from the arts world. And with 4 actors, I prepared scenes from the play that would animate the central themes. For John, Antigone speaks powerfully to the Northern Ireland situation. How far does the rule of law go? How can we define natural justice? How does one reconcile different, sincerely held political beliefs or cultural traditions with the rule of law and the security of the state? How can people relate to the law when they don't acknowledge the state that administers it? One man's refusenik is another man's criminal, or as the cliche has it, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. And what will Northern Ireland do with its graves? What should be done with the dead and their hold over the living? From the obsession with commemoration to the families who are still searching for the truth about how their relatives were killed and searching for justice for those killings, to the disappeared and those families who have no grave at all. Our colloquium that day in his conference room was entitled Antigone, Law Against Justice. I introduced the play and my experiences with it, and we presented the scenes. Then there was a discussion chaired jointly by David Ford, the Northern Irish Justice Minister, and Carol Ní Chulainn, the Minister for Culture and Heritage. But the guest speaker was no less a figure than George Steiner, the man who literally wrote the book on Antigone, a book called Antigones, an astonishing work of scholarship which traces the influence of the Antigone myth throughout the history of Western civilization and culture. He was spellbinding as he spoke about Sophocles and the play, about Dike, daughter of Zeus, the goddess of justice, about legality as a male concept, interrogated and undermined in the play by the young woman, Antigone, and of Hegel's obsession with the play, as the perfect exemplar of his dialectical model, Creon's thesis, Antigone as antithesis, and the audience left to create and maybe to act out the synthesis, and of Hegel's belief that Antigone was a superior being to Jesus Christ, morally more eminent, because Christ knew that he would sit at the right hand of God, and Antigone does not know what she will experience beyond death. He spoke of the validity of resistance when fundamental values are transgressed, of the gap between individual conscience and public law, between transcendent moral passion and rational mundanity, between, as he put it, the hunger striker and the body politic. He demonstrated that Antigone had arguably been the most potent dramatic, moral and legal text of the last 2,500 years, as alive now, as generative of questions as it ever was. Steiner says, it looks at us now and answers Yeats. The centre cannot hold, says Yeats. The centre has never held, says Sophocles. The discussion was complex and passionate, and in a vindication for the Attorney General, it used the material of the play itself, the actual story. The lawyers were clearly galvanised by being able to look up from the legal minutiae and have wider dilemmas presented in a concise, engaging, metaphorical form in a play. The AG himself was so enthused by the response to this that he decided it deserved a wider audience and he wanted to spread the debate. So in May last year, I got a call to say they had enough money for a week's rehearsal with a full cast, and they'd booked the hall. The hall being the Great Hall of Stormont, where the Northern Irish Assembly sits. Stormont is a notorious building, long a symbol of unionist hegemony. Look at it there with its feng shui of dominance, of Catholics need not apply. With Lord Craigavon, who spoke of a Protestant parliament for Protestant people, still standing proudly on his plinth, still saying no. But it's now where all parties sit. Sinn Féin with the DUP, they're all now inside the tent. And while it still feels a little bit odd being there, old prejudices die hard. And while its existence seems to further affirm the island of two nations, with 2 parliaments and a fixed border in between. It's also wonderful that such a place is now hosting plays, has different voices ringing on in it, ringing out in it. And again, I think this is almost worth standing back and looking at. This is an Attorney General putting his personal reputation and the weight of his office behind the presentation of a play in the seat of government. If we sometimes have difficulty keeping the faith, have doubts about the importance of drama, well, there's a man who doesn't. So we presented our stage reading of Antigone at the foot of the huge sort of Sunset Boulevard marble staircase in the main hall, a place that was acoustically disastrous, but, however, that also hummed with the resonances of politics and power. But it took 30 years and 3,600 dead before this new Stormont came into being. The writer Alfred Dublin says, the real question with which Antigone confronts us is how is the world of the living to conduct itself to the world of the dead? And then in the discussion after we'd performed the play, with panel members Paul Given from the DUP and the Sinn Féin's Raymond McCartney, a former hunger striker, the talk was centrally of the dead and how we were to deal with, as the phrase has it, the legacy of the past in a post-conflict situation. As in the colloquium with Steiner, the discussion was framed in reference to the play. People used Antigone's determination to bury her brother properly as the conduit for the discussion about how to cope with the cat's cradle of these issues. The processes of remembering the dead, the obligation to remember, the ongoing obsession with commemoration, often more for political ends than for authentic emotional ones. Pierce said, life springs from death, and from the graves of patriot men and women spring living nations. And it's stirring stuff. Or the psychological need for people to convince themselves that it was all worth it. I regularly go past a mural in Armagh, pictures of youngsters, young men, volunteer so-and-so, age 25, age 19. Fuair Bass, their son Saoirse na HÉireann. They died for Ireland's freedom. Did they? God help them. Not much Saoirse na HÉireann around this place, be it with the border or the ECB. And then there's the contested hierarchies of victimhood. Who exactly constitutes the honoured dead? Eteocles or Polynices? One man's freedom fighter is another man's. So, is it the IRA volunteer? The prison officer who didn't check under his car? The unfortunate killed in a no-warning bomb in 1972? The UDR man shot outside his house? The unarmed INLA man killed by the SAS in a field in South Armagh? Or the person who was accused of being a tout, was tortured and is buried God knows where? And could and should society be allowed to slowly recalibrate the status of the dead? I have difficulty even using the word forget, so that the leaden weight of the past does not cripple the living and strangle the future. Sophocles' story of 2 brothers killing each other, of the sister burying one of them, and of the events it set in motion, found powerful resonance with the panel and with the audience. I was told afterwards, that's Northern Ireland's play. But then, as Steiner says, there isn't a society that hasn't found in this story with an intimate and compelling echo of its own situation and necessities. With a multifaceted work of genius like Antigone, Steiner says, we don't really read it, it reads us. And as I said, the gesture of it being performed in Stormont was positive in itself. The very fact of the presentation was a piece of political theatre, a part of the ongoing process of transforming that building into a place of politics and possibility, rather than a house of prejudice. And these things matter, be it Ariel Sharon walking onto the Temple Mount, or somebody who'd RSVP'd to the Attorney General and said, sorry, couldn't make it to the play that evening, Martin McGuinness. He was over in England that evening. On April the 8th, the same night that we were performing the play in Stormont, he was over in Windsor Castle. Heaney famously wrote, be advised, my passport's green. No glass of ours was ever raised to toast the Queen. But 30 years later, Martin McGuinness did just that. He participated in political theatre. He made the gesture. He raised his glass to the future. And word of this reached us in Stormont. McGuinness toasted the fucking Queen! And after the performance, a few of us were left, all the chairs cleared away, it's all over, da-da. A few of us were left standing about outside at the colonnades, a bit loath to rush away, standing looking down at Craigavon's statue and talking about the significance and symbolism of it all. Antigone and Stormont, McGuinness raising the glass in Windsor Castle, about changed times. But just in case I thought things were going to get more manageable, that the confusions were maybe going to clear by dint of plays or politics, one of the actors said to me, Jesus, do you know what I heard today? More people have killed themselves in Northern Ireland since the Good Friday Agreement than died in the whole of the Troubles. Now, there are many reasons for that, of course, but the investigation into that shockingly high figure was clear in its conclusion that a lot of it was Troubles-related, and that, and I quote, individuals who've experienced a conflict-related event were even more likely than those who've experienced other types of trauma to have suicidal ideation and to act upon those plans. It's as if the world of the dead is determined to replicate itself, to claim more victims, as if 2,500 years on from its first performance, poor wee Antigone, mourning her dead brother, is condemned to keep on dying. The chorus in the play has a speech. He's condemning Antigone somewhat, but he's lamenting her fate. The family is blessed that has not been touched by evil. For once a house has been cursed by heaven, the foundations crumble, the walls crack, the stones rain down on father, children, and all the line to come. The sorrows of the living pile up upon the sorrows of the dead, like bodies on a battlefield, the breathing trapped in a net of limbs until their lungs collapse, a father's arm clamped across his struggling daughter's mouth. The last light in the house of Oedipus is snuffed to smoke, blown by the bluster of a brazen girl and the angry breath of God.
Thanks so much, Conall. Please welcome Susanna Trisellian.
Hello, thank you. How does one follow something like that? I'm going to speak a great deal slower and pause quite a lot. I'm also going to be showing a film that will speak a great deal more eloquently than I will. I'm here to speak with you about the beginning of a project. It's a project called Ariadne, and it's a project that looks specifically at female theatre makers who work in conflict-affected areas. The idea for this came from my background as a theatre director, specializing in international theatre, and as was explained, frequently working with the European Theatre Convention as an ambassador, whatever on earth that might mean, and as a creative. And also very much from my work on a programme in the UK called Woman's Hour on BBC Radio 4, which I've worked on now for horrifyingly about 12 years, and has very much shaped my perspective on the world, as these things do. It came about after a time where I was watching. They were bringing in too many statistics. There were news reports about percentages of female representation. Newspapers that have 20% of front pages contributed by women. 2 editors on national newspapers are women. On the Today programme, approximately 20% of the contributors are women. I know from my own personal experience in the theatre industry that women are massively underrepresented. There was an absolutely, forgive me, and I'll probably never get a job again now, but devastating celebration at the National Theatre in London of 50 years of the National Theatre, where they brought together a showcase of all of the sort of remarkable plays that they had performed over the last 50 years. One of those plays was written by a woman. Absolutely horrific. Anyway, so you add together all of these kinds of heightened awareness of women and their representation, and then you add to that an interest of mine in conflict-affected areas. And born out of that was a conversation that I had with a very seminal man in this area, Professor James Thompson at the University of Manchester, who runs an association called In Place of War. I went to him saying, I'd like to look at women, and I'd like to look at women who are making theatre in conflict-affected areas in Central Europe. And he went, brilliant, yes. So where you start is there's this woman called Diana Milosevic. She works in Serbia. She has this incredible theatre company called Da Theatre. Brilliant. I write it down. And then he goes, yeah, but there's also, does it have to be Central Europe? Because there's this woman, she's called Ruwanthie de Chickera. She's in Sri Lanka. She's amazing what she's doing. Oof. And then there's Hope Azeda. She's in Rwanda. Are you sure you need to keep this in Central and Eastern Europe? No, James, no, I don't. Together we come up with a selection of 6 extraordinary women, and Project Ariadne was born. The Arts Council of England gave a grant for me and my then and now colleague, Georgie Whedon, filmmaker, to go and visit Rwanda and Burundi. Rwanda to visit Hope Azeda, Burundi to visit Frederique Lont, who's a Belgian director who works in Burundi and the DRC. I'm going to show you a film in a second, one of the films that comes out of this, the film specifically about Frederique. She hasn't seen it yet, so if you hear howls, you'll know why. This talk was going to be very different. This morning, we had the very first meeting of Ariadne. The Abbey found out about us. Thank you, the Abbey, and have invited all of the Ariadne directors here to Dublin, and they are all going to be presenting one by one on the panel. We have Ruwanthie here. You will hear from Diana, you'll hear from Frederique, you'll hear from Iman Aoun, who was spoken about before, and Hope. The idea was that we would start a network, that we would make films about these women, that we would raise awareness about them. And then we had this meeting this morning where it became very clear that Ariadne needs to be a great deal more than that. There was an urgency and a passion and a transparent need from these very powerful women, as you will see when they talk, to make powerful change. They are, as we all are in our various different ways, working in frequently still very patriarchal societies. And there is a feeling that things need to change very fundamentally, and that art linked with politics is how that's going to happen. So Ariadne is taking on a form that Georgie and I couldn't have dreamt of really a couple of hours before. So forgive me if I look a little stunned. It's because I am. We're in a very interesting moment, and I hope that you can all be a part of this if you so desire. I said that I would come and talk about why it's important to put the spotlight on women and on women who make theatre in conflict-affected areas. There are various obvious reasons. Patriarchal societies, the fact that there aren't very many women around the world who have got that profile. However, when you meet these women, that's when you see really why we need to spotlight the work that they're doing. they are making extraordinary change in their societies, and they are dragging their societies forward, either by their bootstraps or by their hair, depending on how you look at it. Georgie and I have made a film about Frederique. The work speaks for itself, and I think very much, however Ariadne evolves in the future, the more that we can spread the word about the practice, the reasons for why these women are making the extraordinary work that they make, which is, in the words of James Thompson, either in spite of the war that they have lived through or because of the war that they have lived through. Ultimately, it comes down to theatre, it comes down to society, it comes down to human connection, and it comes down to making a massive change. So I'm going to leave the word to Frederique and her amazing group Théâtre et Réconciliation, who work in Burundi and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And as for Ariadne, look out for these directors and their theatre makers and the talks that they give. And watch this space. Thank you very much. And one more.
My name is Frederique Lont. I come from Belgium. I'm a French-speaking woman. I'm a play director, and I am a founder and the director of Théâtre and Réconciliation, Theatre and Reconciliation. And my objective is to reconstruct destroyed community with theatre. I'm working in conflict area, in most of the time in Burundi and RDC Congo. The story of Theatre and Reconciliation comes from conflict, of course. Then the first time how to resolve my own conflict. And that's theatre solved my own conflict. And I met my ex-husband, who was a rebel in Casamance, and then I began to make theatre in Casamance. Then it's a love story who begins with with conflict and theatre in conflict zones. It's me through theatre, or it's theatre through me. But both make the people share their suffering or their stories. And then with that, I'm doing theatre, with their assentiment, with their agreement, of course. For me, all the people are the same. Condemned to death, criminals, raper, torturer, perpetrator, victim of torture. For me, they are all human beings. There is no difference, because if they are perpetrator, I could be a perpetrator also. If they killed people, I can kill also, because I'm the same part of the humanity. That's all. They make improvisation. I direct improvisation. They are not improvisation anymore, they are scenes. And then I put the scenes together, and I make a list, and then after I build. And I make gesture to the actors. For example, this is the scene of the head, this is the scene of the eyes, and that's all. The actors that didn't know what I'm going to do. I like to shock, to give electric shock to the audience. That's why I put always emotional scene and laughing scene, and sometimes in the same time, and I can see the audience laughing and crying in the same time. The words they are using, sometimes the words they change the words, it's not exactly the same words. But especially in conflict zone, I'm very, comment on dit, prudente? Careful, because it's dangerous to use the words. This scene happens in prison, in Bujumbura, when he was in prison, when he was condemned to death. I asked them improvisation about, imagine that you are in prison, and then it take this position, like you saw, and then he begins to say, and open the door, please let me get out, I'm suffering.
Ouvrez-moi! J'ai besoin de la lumière.
People are always ask me, well, they were condemned to death and they are alive and out of the prison. How can it happen?
Je suis innocent.
It happens because they were condemned to death because they were political prisoners. And then when the government is changing, the amnesty the political prisoners. That's why condemned to death prisoners are not anymore condemned to death, they are alive and they are free.
Personne ne sait me secourir. Ouvrez-moi.
When you are doing theater in a conflict zone, there is a lot of deaths.
Qui sommes-nous? Nous sommes des morts. Nous sommes les morts.
It's normal to bring the deaths back.
Quand est-ce que vous êtes morts?
Because the dead people have to say something. They didn't have the time or even the place to speak about the deaths. Putting on the stage dead people speaking about the way they were murdered.
Comment est-ce que vous êtes morts?
It's very, very symbolic.
On nous a tués à la machette.
It's very cathartic.
On nous a tués avec des fusils. On nous a jetés dans les toilettes.
When I'm directing, when I'm doing my job, I don't feel I'm a woman. I'm just. It's difficult to say. Of course, I am a woman, and sometimes I'm very feminine. But when I'm directing, I'm just a director. Perhaps it will be interesting to ask the actors what they think about that, the fact that I am a woman. For example, the children soldier boys, they call me Général. You can say? They call me Général. I say, yes, I'm your general. My work is a safe space with lots of love and emotion. The first words which come is catastrophe. The second is humanity, and the third is tryout. Relation, funny, and tears, and politic conscientiousness, and conflict resolution, and and reconstruction of the community.
dazukuri shewe dazukuri shewe dazukuri kandi nemera nukwi wanyu.
Thanks so much, Susanna. Please welcome Ruwanthie de Chickera.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about this laptop, but I didn't print my talk out. So in the 15 minutes that I've been given to tell you about myself, my country, my life's work, my theatre, I think it's reasonable to agree that it's going to be quite scrappy. I'm just going to give you a few highlights, a few insights about my country, about my people. And I also want to share with you, I think the main part of my speech is going to be my sharing with you of a couple of questions that right now I'm grappling with as a director who creates devised work in an area of political conflict. And right at the end, I'm going to show you a little trailer of one of our plays, just so you know the kind of theatre that we do. So just a little bit about Sri Lanka. It's this little island in the Indian Ocean, just under India. I was told, by the way, I'm sorry if I'm being patronizing, but I was told yesterday, I was instructed to assume that you know nothing about where I come from. So my apologies if I'm being patronizing. So we have as a nation, we were colonized for 500 years, first by the Portuguese and the Dutch, and then the British for 150 years. They left us in 1948, and then we had about 75 years of self-rule, during which we've completely messed up our country. We've had 2 very bloody insurrections, and one 30-year-old civil war, which ended very badly, very nastily, very drastically in 2009. After 2009, we plunged into possibly the most corrupt regime that our country has known. And the good news is that 2 weeks ago, we managed to defeat this regime in an election at which we had 82% voter turnout, which was phenomenal. So we are reeling at the moment. You know, we are in a bit of a limbo stage. We don't know what to do now. We've got rid of some very bad guys, and we're not quite sure where we're heading right now. Things could get very good, but they could also slip back into being the same old bad that we've known for a long time. As a people, my country, we're known to be sort of fiercely hospitable, very relaxed. We love our drinks. We have this sort of neurotic island mentality. We're a little paranoid, rather insular. Well, we mess things up a lot, but we laugh about it also a lot. And somehow, along the way, a lot of people have left our country, a lot of people have been killed, and a lot of people have been destroyed. And it pains me to feel that we still haven't found our own unique path and our way and our identity through this all. And I feel that we are really a very injured and broken society and in desperate need of a clear way forward. Today what I want to talk to you about is some of the complex and nuanced sort of challenges that I am facing right now, creating devised work in such a country with young people. Devising theatre in a post-war situation, it has been a very unpredictable experience for me. And the unpredictability came to me not from an area that I anticipated it would. I always assumed that my biggest challenges, my biggest lessons and my biggest failures would come to me through how my audiences responded to my plays. However, most recently that has not been the case. Now, when we talk about the impact of a play, what we generally refer to is the impact that this play has on an audience or on society. Now, while this impact is visible and it's public, it is, in my opinion, superficial in comparison to another level of impact, which is the impact that a play has on a much smaller group, and that is the artists that create this play. I have been involved in plays that have changed the lives of the people who created these plays in the most profound ways. And I have also been responsible for plays that have left its artists behind, which have been made sometimes in spite of its artists, sometimes abandoning its artists, and sometimes even framing them and ridiculing them. And that's what I'd like to discuss with you today. See, in the rush of creating a devised piece, okay, I'm just going to stop there and explain a little bit what a devised piece is. So when you create a piece of devised theatre, you create something collaboratively. It's sort of organic. There's no script. Roles are interchangeable. So it's a group of artists who come together, and there's a huge amount of investment by everybody. And where we start and where we end is not always very clear right at the beginning. So in this rush of creating a devised piece, there are many last-minute navigational decisions that need to be made. And each decision changes the course of the journey that you take. And it's a huge gamble. And often you need the perspective of time to really understand the real lessons that you learn from the kind of theatre that you create. In devising, I have learned time and time again that the artists that we create these stories with themselves are broken byproducts of the broken country in which we are trying to reach out to. The bottom line in devised work, and why I find it so challenging and why I keep returning to it, is that it is only as strong and as deep and as profound as the sum total of its artists. It's an uncharted course, and it really can take you anywhere. And even one change in your cast, in your company, could change the course of where you're going and where you end up. Devised work demands a very particular and very high investment from its artists. Before an actor can lose his identity in the comforting folds of a character, there is much work that this actor needs to do as a person. Work that demands honesty and vulnerability, a revealing of knowledge, stance, position, prejudice. Everything is scrutinized in the rehearsal room. It's judged, it's challenged, and opinions are flung around, beaten up, they're sort of thrown away, they're picked up again, and slowly, very, very slowly sometimes, through all of this thrashing around, a story emerges, a concept emerges, and a play emerges. No one fully owns it, but no one can fully disown it either. It's a strange creature that's born out of a devising process. So you can understand that the stakes, the personal stakes in these productions are very high. What I have done now, up to now, is that I have sort of created a sketchy backdrop against which I'm going to share with you two experiences that I have recently had as a director, which made me question my role and responsibility and loyalty by the stories I create, the audiences I create them for, and also the artists that I create them with. The first play I want to talk to you about is a play called In Search of Sivaramani. Sivaramani is a Tamil name. Tamil people are the largest minority in Sri Lanka. Sinhalese people are the majority, 80%. Tamil people are the largest minority. And the civil war that lasted for 30 years was a conflict between the Tamil people and the Sinhalese people. This play, Sivaramani, I devised with a group of Sinhala university students. The Sinhala, the majority university students. And the play was about a Tamil poet, Tamil being the minority, who killed herself and burnt her poetry as a mark of political protest in the 80s. Now, when she did this, she was about the same age of the students that I was creating this play with 20 years down the line. However, she belonged to the other ethnic community. The students belonged to the majority Sinhalese. Now, the story of this elusive Tamil poet, I could see clearly touch the lives and the imaginations of these students. They were moved and they wanted desperately to create a brilliant play about this Tamil poet. However, they could just not come together to do this. And the reason had nothing to do with the subject matter of the play. They were all fascinated by her. However, they could not rise above their own petty insecurities and rivalries to adequately address this play. Now, this continued for a long time, this situation of nothing happening, of failed rehearsals, of mediocre writing, of fighting, of all of that. And I watched this for a while. And then I realized that the play that needed to come out of this situation was about these students' inability to make this play. Their inability to move beyond themselves, to get beyond their own differences. There was a lot of competition in this class. It was a final year production. They were fighting for grades, because it was a final year production. They knew they'd be fighting for jobs after this. They couldn't get beyond this and address the issue before them. They had no knowledge. They had no knowledge of what it meant to be a Tamil person. They had no perspective. They had no generosity, really, or space to tackle or address this issue. And this was tragic. And it was this tragedy that connected the play most honestly with some of the deepest reasons for the protracted ethnic war in my country. So we did the play. The audience loved it. We got excellent reviews. And if I may say so myself, the play was really very good. It was. It was very clever, it was very good, it was multi-layered. However, this is where it gets interesting. Not many of the students in the play knew what the play turned out to be. In fact, several years later, after the play ended, and I heard from one of the students, one of the young actresses realized the frame through which the audience had viewed her in this play. And she realized for the first time that her performance had been ironical, and she was not aware of it. And she threatened to sue me, really, because she was really annoyed. She felt that I had made a fool of her on stage. So if you can imagine this strange situation, I let these actors create what they honestly believed they were creating. However, I was in control of the lens through which the audience viewed them. And I framed them. That's what I did. They thought they were acting in one kind of play. And actually, they were acting in another kind of play. And to date, I haven't decided if that was one of the cleverest things I've done as a director or one of the dirtiest, lowest things I've done as a director. The other play that I'm going to talk to you about, which is also which is going to be the play that I'll show you a sort of a 2.5-minute little trailer of. It's a play called Walking Path, and it was we created it last year. It's quite new. Walking Path turned out to be actually quite a groundbreaking piece of theatre back home. In response to hugely strict and sort of uncompromising censorship issues we were having back home, we decided to do a play without any words. And what we chose for our subject matter was his intense and almost sort of hysterical urban beautification drive that the government was putting the country through after the end of the war. See, the war had ended, and they were cleaning up the city, and it was very, very brutal, really. They were just sort of getting rid of miles and miles of slum area, just mowing people's houses down and putting up beautiful parks. And guess what? The military ran our parks, not in uniform, but in civils. We had soldiers all over the place, monitoring our behavior. So this was the kind of situation that we were getting into after the war, in a peaceful, situation. So Walking Path was a play about the militarization of our parks and everything, and our society through our parks, and what was happening to our city and to our people through the city. Now, we began devising this play. I began devising it with a group of young people again. And what we did is we visited these parks, and we observed the behavior of these people, the people in these parks, and then we started creating our scenes. And this was our devising process. Now, while our actors enjoyed this very much, I soon, it wasn't only me, I co-directed it, we soon began to realize that what they were really interested in were the issues that they perceived as directly affecting people like them in the parks. And there was one particular issue which is really quite funny, which is that after the militarization of our parks, we, couples, lovers are really victimized because, soldiers follow them around blowing whistles whenever they sort of cuddle up or hold hands. It's ridiculous. It was one of the scenes of our plays, but it was only one of them. So my young actors were very interested in this issue, and they felt that that's what the play needed to be about. So a tug of war began at this point. The actors were not really interested in talking about the wider political issues because they felt it didn't affect them. And me and my co-director were interested in talking about the more, the wider issues. So because my actors felt that this didn't affect them directly or personally, the issues that we wanted to talk about, they began to depart, step away, stop investing in the process. Because the play we were creating was no longer about them. Now, I knew they were wrong. And them being wrong was what was truly deeply wrong with our society, that people would only invest in addressing the problems that they assumed impacted them directly, and that's all that they were interested in. So because of this, I kept pushing them, and things got difficult. And after one point, we started doing something that we'd never really done before in a collaborative, divisive process, which is we told them to shut up and just act. We're taking the decisions here. You just do what we say. We've never done this before. So we didn't bother, or we couldn't, or we didn't have the time, or maybe we were too tired, but we didn't carry them on that journey with us to that place where we knew we were going to, so that they could see the play that we saw. It would have been a shame not to do that, I felt, because had we not done that, we would have lost the play. But instead, we lost our cast. Here again, the play was incredibly well received. It's still being heralded as a breakthrough piece of theatre. However, we were not able to take our most deeply affected people on that journey with us. And they, funnily enough, find themselves in this strange situation now of receiving glowing praise for a play that they don't really believe in. I'm kind of going to end it there. And I know it's abrupt, and I apologize that it's abrupt, but it's abrupt because these are some issues that I haven't quite sorted out in my own head. And I'll be very interested, if any of this resonates with any of you, to hear from you and learn from your experience and your insight and your wisdom. Because I am really looking for answers. And we were discussing this just a few hours ago, how tired we all feel because we feel we're trying to do, we're working all the time, but the odds seem so large and so enormous. So I would be really interested to hear if anybody has any feedback on these questions that I raised. If I were to sort of prematurely try to cap it all off and sum it all up, I'm not going to do it, but I'll just give it a half-hearted attempt here. I'll say that if your goal is to make a good play, your task is reasonably easier. But if your goal is to really try and heal the wounds of society through theatre, then I feel that our journey is much longer and much, much more complex and moves forward much, much, much more slowly than we wanted to. Thank you very much. And right now, I'll just show you a trailer of the play Walking Path. I apologize, it's a trailer, so it's a little promotional and all that. But, I couldn't really pick a scene to show you. But I do have it on video if anybody is interested. So. I knew this would happen to me. It's okay. So. Sorry?
Are we close?
Okay. So we have 2 minutes. Anybody who wants to sort of sing a song? Or it's like
we'd love to take some questions from the floor. If anyone would like to raise their hand, one of our roving mics will find you. If you have a question for any of our panelists, any of our 3 panelists.
Oh, that's.
Hello, I'd like to ask Ruwanthie, when you were using the devising technique to create theatre, did motifs from Sri Lankan folklore come up?
Where? I'm sorry, where are you?
Sorry, I'm up here.
Yeah. Sorry?
I was just wondering, when you were using the kind of spontaneous devising technique to create theatre, did motifs from Sri Lankan culture, folklore, come up?
Not in the plays that we have done so far. Yeah, not in the plays that we have done so far. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Right here, Ruth.
Sorry. The mic's on its way.
I've just a question for Conall. I'm very interested in your work in Ramallah. Here I am. And because my daughter-in-law was involved in producing and filming The Women of Troy with the Syrian women refugees in Amman and later on in Beirut. And what was very interesting was that these women had never acted in the theatre before and were very hesitant. I'm interested as to why Antigone, which seems absolutely the perfect form for theatre that you were doing, they used in this particular production the local women who had, as I say, never acted, and they interspersed in the Women of Troy, these women's own stories about their life. And that was quite seamless, that you almost didn't know where one began and the other ended. And the conflict was, of course, that many of these women's husbands didn't want them to be exposing themselves like this in theatre, so they came and went in terms of performers. But it was terribly relevant, and I can't understand why Antigone didn't work in that form. It seems so absolutely created specifically for that purpose.
Is this on? Yeah. It kind of worked still for me kind of conceptually in terms of an archetypal clash. But in truth, it's Iman who would need to probably to speak to this more specifically. I think sometimes that a kind of a conceptual framework, even if it seems to work at some kind of conceptual level, and I think, well, that's functioning as a metaphor. Antigone, virtually the suicide bomber versus the autocratic Creon. That sometimes whenever metaphors come up against reality, the metaphor just begins to crumble. You know, it just doesn't have enough critical mass. It doesn't have enough specific gravity to it. So that's when I was saying in my speech that whenever Iman said, listen, broadly speaking, this does not connect enough in our reality, I didn't go in and try and argue the toss too much. I just thought, actually, no, this metaphor may well work as I say, a discussion document for us in the West to talk about kind of the competing claims of rightness in the Middle East. But in terms of people who are living it on a daily basis and are stuck at checkpoints and are under military occupation, no, I'm sorry, your metaphor just doesn't have enough traction for us. So it was that. I still believe that Greek plays, they are wonderful archetypal structures, and as say Steiner demonstrates, that in 2,500 years there has been an infinite number of Antigones which have been used to investigate different situations, and have done so wonderfully, as indeed has So many of the Greek plays, we still keep coming back to them, partly because we haven't solved them. The problems that they dramatize and animate, we haven't managed to crack as a species, you know. But I absolutely respect the people who are saying, no, I'm sorry, this is in our face here, this existence, and your metaphorical, archetypal construction just doesn't actually ring to us. At which point it's time to walk away.
Thanks very much. There's another question down here at the front.
Thanks. This is a question for Ruwantthy. I was just wondering, the two plays you mentioned were from a cast pool of young actors in college and so on, and I just wondered if you ever worked with older groups or community groups, or people maybe with more life experience or even experience of the conflict.
Oh yes, I have. In fact, one of the things that I've been grappling with is it more sensible actually to do devise work with people whose political stance and all of that you're familiar with and you know. It definitely would be easier because it wouldn't be so unpredictable. But I really do enjoy what I learn through my negotiation with people whose stances and are not all that clear or not so homogeneous, really, you know. And the first group were actually university students. Second group were young, but they're out of university, so they're in their 30s, and you know, so they're not kids. But it wasn't a homogeneous group. So it wasn't a. I've devised plays with groups that can be labeled as one particular type. So you know. I don't know, battered women or something. You know, you get a group like that, and you can be pretty sure that their views are going to be somewhat the same. But the challenge for me, and what I've realized, what I was trying to articulate, is that it's almost a kind of a parallel to the challenges you face in society, trying to draw all these people together and get them to negotiate and then create something that they want to say. And there have been many times in a play, and I didn't talk about it, but where I've really compromised what I wanted to say, just in order to include what everybody else wants to say. And I think that's part of the negotiation. And I mean, and that's important. And you feel that at the end of the day, you're compromising your vision as an artist. But maybe for those people who come together there, it's a much more profound experience. And possibly the message that you also give out to your audience could turn out to be much more balanced, much more acceptable. I don't know. I mean, who knows? It's just, you know, decisions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Ruth, I think we're ready to play the video, so we might do that, and then we might call it a day, and the panelists will be outside to answer more questions for you, if that's okay.
Okay, then.
please show your appreciation. For Ruwanthie, for Connell, and for Susannah.
Thank you.